sickle cells.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Corner Guys Boxing Podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Strambox, and with me, as always, Timothy Rivera.
What's good, Thomas? How you doing, bro?
Not much, Tim. Doing pretty good, feeling a little bit better, and as usual, another podcast guest taps out on us. It's just the way of the podcast life, I guess.
It's a tough life.
It is. You thought being involved in boxing was bad. Podcasting is just as bad. Sadly. Going over a quick recap of the weekend, there wasn't a ton of great action besides that Dazn, well, actually it was ESPN Plus card. They had Vasily Lomachenko beating Luke Campbell by unanimous decision. It kind of went as we expected. I remember we were both kind of thinking a late stoppage to like a 117, 111 type decision, 118, 110, and it pretty much went along that. Once Lomachenko, I think, figured out Campbell's height and being southpaw and everything, and he turned up the gas in the second half of the fight, and he came close to getting, looked like he came close a couple times getting Campbell out of there, but Campbell was able to hold on. He proved a good fight, but he just didn't have the firepower to stay with Lomachenko or the boxing savvy.
I looked like in the first couple of rounds that Campbell was trying to use that long jab and that distance. And like you said, Lomachenko figured him out. And I have to say, like, Lomachenko's one of these fighters where you know he's great and he just kind of surprises you every time that you watch him. Because I think he fought a really, really, really good fight, man. Against a guy who's tall and is not necessarily easy to look good against. I also think, you know, people kind of forget that Lomachenko is this really isn't his natural weight, 35. And the fact that he's almost an undisputed champion in that division just goes to show his greatness. I actually, you know what, I think even higher Lomachenko after this fight, to be honest with you, even though I predicted that he was going to finish him around the 8th or 9th round, and that didn't materialize. But, you know, just the fact that, you know, he knocked him down the 11th. The stamina looked beautiful. He had a really, really crisp jab. The head movement was nice. You know, the body punching was fantastic. I think it was a very impressive performance by Lomachenko. And I kind of just think, you know, aside from the fight, I kind of just think it's time for fans to, you know, I see in a lot of boxing groups, you know, people kind of just get down on him. I just don't understand it. Lomachenko's been having tough fights his entire career, and you can't think of much fighters who had from the very beginning tough fights. You know, so props to him. I'm seeing a lot of people for some reason saying that Gervonta Davis is going to knock him out or Mikey Garcia would knock him out. I just don't see it, man. Lomachenko is truly greatness that fans should appreciate because, you know, one day he's going to be retired, man, and then we're going to look back at his greatness in retrospect. But it was a great performance and a good night for the Ukrainian.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think a lot of people just don't like the technical boxing side of things. They want more of, you know, two guys brawling and, you know, things like that, which I understand. But I think last broadcast I said I don't think Lomachenko's boring either. I think the only way he's been boring is just that some of his fights are so one-sided. But it's not like you stated that he's even fighting bad competition. I mean, Luke Campbell was a top 10 guy easy in that division. If you go back to the Nicholas Walters fight, he dominated him. If you go back to the Rigondeaux fight, you know, granted, Rigondeaux went up in weight, but also Rigondeaux was the one that kept clamoring for the fight, and look what happened. He got dominated. Jason Sosa is going to be fighting Burchelt soon. He got dominated. You know, everybody that he's fought. Gary Russell was pretty close, but Gary Russell is also, I think, an elite level talent that's just not fighting elite fighters to be considered an elite level talent. But talent-wise, I think Russell is right up there. You know, I thought Lomachenko, I think, won that one 117, 111 my card. So he lost a few rounds, but your third fight, you went out and you beat Gary Russell for a vacant belt. I mean, that, to me, says all that there is to say about the man.
I absolutely agree. People forget about that. I mean, like you said, talent-wise, I would disagree with you a little bit on Gary Russell. I do think he's an elite fighter that just for some reason wants to fight once a year. He's, debatably, he is the best featherweight in the world. Lomachenko beat him in the third fight, and he beat him pretty easily. Lomachenko has a borderline Hall of Fame career, and he's not even 20 fights into it, man. I mean, it's beyond impressive. Like you said, he's a technical fighter, but his fights are not boring. His fights are definitely not. I wouldn't call this fight with Luke Campbell boring. I thought it was actually a pretty entertaining fight. The fight with Rigondeaux was kind of a stinker, I ain't gonna lie. And Nicholas Walters, I mean, he just dominated. You can't even say anything about that fight if one man just completely dominates the other. Of course, it's pretty much going to be a stinker. But Lomachenko is definitely a great fighter, man. And I assume that the next fight for him is going to be the winner of Comey and Lopez, which I definitely look forward to. And I give Lomachenko the edge in that, even though I like Comey and Lopez as fighters, but Lomachenko is just on a different level.
Well, I think you misunderstood what I said about Russell. I think Russell is an elite talent-wise, but he just hasn't been able to showcase it because, like you said, he fights once a year, and he's not fighting other top-notch fighters, except for Lomachenko, which he lost, which is nothing to knock him about. But, I just think if Russell can showcase his skills against, people in that division like Leo Santa Cruz or who else in that division? Valdez moved up, but Warrington. If he can get the bigger fights, I think we'll really see what Russell's made out of. But I think talent-wise, he's an elite guy as far as talent, but we have to see him, use that against other fighters. But apparently, one of the rumors I heard about Lomachenko was that before the Kami Lopez fight, he's supposed to go back down to 130. The rumor is, and Frampton is supposed to move up to 130. And they're supposed to fight in the interim until the Kami and Lopez gets figured out. I mean, I guess for a stay busy fight, it's not terrible because realistically, Lomachenko is not really a 135-pound fighter. If that happens, I don't see him having any real issues with Frampton. I think he stops him late. But again, if the Lopez Kami is happening in December 14th and Lomachenko wants to keep himself busy with something in that same month or maybe January, I mean, why not? I mean, I don't think Frampton's a cakewalk, but Lomachenko shouldn't have any problems with him. But, he's earned the right to take on Frampton, in my opinion, if he wants to at 130.
I agree. It's definitely a stay busy fight because, I think you and me will both agree that Frampton doesn't have what it takes at this point to beat Lomachenko. But it's a stay busy fight. There's no way that I don't see him I mean, he would have the chance to become an undisputed champion at 35 if he faces the winner of Comey and Lopez. So I don't see him passing up on that fight. So I guess the bottom line is I look forward to seeing him in the ring again.
Definitely. And it's interesting with Haney is supposedly going to call out Lomachenko after his next fight. And I love Haney. I think he's a great prospect. Well, he's kind of bordering on contender, if not already a contender. But to me, let's say Lomachenko beats the winner of Lopez Kami, argument's sake. I honestly believe that he may drop back down to 130 again. For the simple fact he unifies 135. I think they know that 140 is too big for him. And all the big names really, I mean, I guess you could say the Tank Davis, but at the same time, he's moving up to 135. He's supposed to be fighting Gamboa, which we called out a month or two back when Gamboa fought on an undercard. And that's just a terrible fight. And nothing against Haney, nothing against Tank Davis, but if you want to fight for all four belts against the unified champion at 135, I really want to see you guys fight somebody before that. Or have Haney and Davis fight each other. And then if Loma does stay at 135, then the winner can face Loma. And I'd be okay with that.
Unfortunately, I feel like Tank Davis has promoted himself in such a way, kind of similar to Adrian Broner, in that he is big without the resume behind it. So him and Lomachenko is a big fight, even though Davis in the ring hasn't earned it. but promotionally he has. Devin Haney is not a big fight, and promotionally, I don't see how that fight could. I mean, Haney would have to build a bigger following, in my opinion. That would just, to me, for Lomachenko or for Top Ranks, that wouldn't be a smart fight at all.
Yeah, I agree, and I really rather see the guys earn it inside the ring. And unfortunately, in today's boxing world, that's not or always necessarily the case. But we'll see what happens. But like you said, the Davis Loma is a big fight. I would just rather Tank earn it by getting 135 and facing somebody that's not Gamboa.
I think he would have earned it if he would have stayed at 30 and faced Tevin Farmer. Let's say he would have absolutely, fucking mopped the floor with Tevin Farmer. That would have been impressive to me. That would have earned all the credit that he's getting now that he hasn't earned, if that makes any sense. Because he gets a lot of credit for a career that really has been fucking shitty as far as opposition. I mean, his hardest fight was Pedraza, who was fucking weight drained, and now he's going up to face a washed-up Gamboa. I mean, he has not earned anything in the ring. But, I mean, Floyd has done a fucking great job by promoting him to this monster that people are fooled to think that he's going to beat Lomachenko. So, props to Floyd for doing that, man.
Yeah, Gamboa's got one more left in him. Now's the time to show it. Just, if you could land some type of Hail Mary punch and just put the whole idea just out to the pasture, that'd have helped me out a lot in life. On the undercard of the Lomachenko Campbell card, we had Fury losing to Povetkin. Again, Fury he's not a good heavyweight, to put it easily. He's just a UK heavyweight. He needs to really stay on the UK scene. He's not a world heavyweight. And every time he steps up, it really shows.
Povetkin is, I wouldn't call him washed up, but like you said, he's certainly not his brother, man. I mean, I just don't think, like you said, I just don't think much of him. I just don't see. Obviously, Povetkin winning means absolutely nothing as far as the heavyweight picture. I mean, who the fuck is he gonna face? To be honest with you, I mean, maybe a fight I would actually like to see him in. And I can't believe we're talking about Povetkin and potential fights, but a fight that I would like to see him in would be him and Konoski. Would actually be a pretty interesting fight to me. But yeah, Fury sucks, man. to put it point blank. If he was able to have a fight with Sam Peters, 30 times, then he would be 30-0 with 30 knockouts, but he can't. So he's not his brother, and does some bare knuckle boxing.
Why not? Do it gypsy style. Also an undercard, a prospect I like at light heavyweight, Joshua Buatsi. He beat Ryan Ford, knockout in the 7th. The one punch did look a little bit low, but also at the same time, Ford was in trouble and down before, in trouble. So I think it was only a matter of time before Ford was actually getting stopped there. But on to some other news. We ended last week's show talking about the Spence Porter pay-per-view and your dislike and my liking of the pay-per-view. So we'll kind of run down the pay-per-view card really quick. Obviously, Errol Spence against Sean Porter is the main event, unification of the WBC and IBF welterweight titles. You have Anthony Durrell defending his WBC super middleweight title against David Benavidez. Mario Barres, and I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name, Akhmedov, sounds good, going for the WBA super lightweight title. And also Josesito Lopez and John Molina are going to be in a welterweight clash. So that is the pay-per-view card. In my opinion, I think nothing really should be a pay-per-view anymore, but if I was going to buy this one, I wouldn't feel terrible because I think it's a lot of action fights.
Okay, here's my problem with it. I partially agree that, yeah, it's a lot of action fights. Barrios is an action fighter. Obviously, Lopez and Molina are action fighters. Benavidez is an action fighter. So, yeah, I agree with you on that account. My whole problem is this. My whole problem that is if you are paying money, which no one pays money anymore, everyone streams. Shout out to any streaming service. Fuck anyone who charges to watch boxing. But if you are going to pay for it, if you're stupid enough to pay for this, it should be matchups of fighters that we know. Or not that we know, because we know who they are, but fighters that are contenders or stars. I mean, I think when, I could be totally wrong about this, but I think when Canelo fought Floyd, now I could be wrong about this, but wasn't a co-main event Matisse versus Garcia?
I don't think so.
What was the main event for Matisse and Garcia? I know it was a Floyd fight.
I'll look it up real quick, actually, because I got the computer right there, so I would look it up.
Yeah, but you see, that is a pay-per-view fight right there. I can't say that a guy who is 7-0 that's not named Lomachenko is on a fucking pay-per-view. You can't even pronounce the guy's last name. Like, how can this guy be on a pay-per-view? How can two fucking fading fighters in Lopez and Molina be on a pay-per-view? If this was a free card, then I'm all for it. But if you got to pay for something like this, it should be stars or contenders on that card. That's all I'm saying. I don't mind the style matchups. I don't mind people getting their shine. But if you're gonna pay for something, it should be all 4 fights should be quality fights. Like Durrell and Benavidez is probably gonna be a fucking blowout. Benavidez is probably gonna blow him out.
That was actually, not to cut you off, the Garcia Matisse was the undercard, actually. You're right. But also had Carlos Molina against Ishii Smith and Pablo Cesar Cano against Ashley Therafane, whatever the hell his last name is.
That's because Ashley and Ishii were Floyd fighters. What can you do?
Yeah, but overall, that undercard, you're getting, all right, Garcia Matisse, the other 2 fights are pretty suspect at best. And here, I think Lopez Molina is a good opener. It's going to be just 2 guys chucking bombs. Durrell Benavidez, I think Benavidez should win, but Durrell's not a pushover, and he's the champ. 31-1-1. I mean, and Barrios is a good prospect. The other guy I'm unfamiliar with, but I know he was an Olympian for, I believe he fought Turkey. They're not putting a 7-0 guy in to get blown out in a major title fight. So, I mean, we'll find out what he's really made of, on the 28th. But I'm kind of thinking this guy's coming to, win the fight, and he's not going to, get blown out in a couple of rounds. He probably may actually win from what I hear of him. So you have the Molina Lopez is probably a pick'em fight, in my opinion. The Barrios Akhmadov fight, that's probably close to pick'em. Benavidez is probably going to be favored over Durrell, but it's not going to be too high, I don't think. So you have 3 fights on paper that are really close to being 50-50.
Okay.
And I think Spence is favored too high on Porter. Spence should win, but I think the odds are a little bit closer than what they suggest. But that, to me, for a welterweight unification fight, is a really good fight, too. So I think this pay-per-view, top to bottom, is better than the Floyd Thurman pay-per-view we were just talking about a couple months back.
If there was no such thing as streaming, right?
Yeah.
Would you pay for this fight?
I would, because I'm a Spence fan. I'd pay him that just alone.
We're not talking about the main event.
Yeah, I think all the other 3 fights are good.
You're crazy, Thomas. I would not pay for this, man. I would not pay for it.
How is it in July you thought the Pacquiao pay-per-view was good when this undercard is better than the Pacquiao-Thurman undercard?
I thought the Pacquiao pay-per-view was good. When did I say that?
You did say it was good. On that show, you said this was a great pay-per-view undercard.
I can't even remember the Pacquiao-Thurman pay-per-view, man.
Oh,
I know Lipinet and Molina were supposed to fight. That is, I just because I'm a Lipinet fan, that to me is a good fight because Lipinet is a contender. He's a guy who gave Mikey Garcia a close fight. He's a contender in my eyes. Plant and Lee, we all knew what was going to happen. That is a shitty fight, and I don't even remember what the other fight was. What was the other fight? I don't.
Plant Lee was on the TV. They had Neri and they had Yugas and Figueroa.
Yeah. And when did I say this was a good pay-per-view?
We're gonna have to go back and review that tape. To fans out there, if they're thinking about buying this, I think it's worthwhile money-wise because I think all 4 fights are going to be competitive. And if you're going to have a pay-per-view, you want 4 fights that are going to be competitive, going to be fun to watch style-wise. And you have, obviously, contender David Benavidez and the Barrios and the other guy, Akhmadov, I'm not too familiar with, but they're both undefeated prospects. And they have Lopez and Molina just going to chuck bombs at each other.
All right. As a fan, I'm going to be watching because I love boxing. And as you said, I think the main event is actually going to be pretty good. I think Sean Porter, good fighter. I think Spence is a good fighter. It's a unification. So I think that's actually a very good fight to watch. I don't like the pay-per-view for the principle of it. Not the talent, but the principle of it, that I think there should be more contenders and stars. But if styles make fights, obviously Lopez and Molina is not a bad fight if you go style-wise. I just don't think that 2 people coming off a loss should be on a pay-per-view. I don't think someone with 7 fights should be on a pay-per-view. The co-main event is okay. I mean, Benavidez versus Durrell, like you said, Durrell, he is what he is. I don't think he has any chance against Benavidez, but I'll probably be wrong. But you know what, man? Maybe it'll be a good pay-per-view. I don't know, fuck it. But it's not one that I'm going to stream. I'm not going to buy that shit. And I hope that everyone that's listening streams it.
Oh, by all means, if people can save money, go for the stream. But, I mean, if you have no streaming option, I don't think it's a bad one to, buy or even go to the theater to watch, where I think theater's like $15 or whatever. And it kind of feels like you're sitting in the crowd because everyone's cheering or whatever the case may be. But on to other news. We'll quickly talk about it just because it's semi-boxing related. Apparently, a lot of people are giving Eddie Hearn some beef about putting this Logan Paul KSI rematch on the Dazn channel. What are your thoughts on that? I have my own thoughts. What are you thinking about, Dazn and Eddie Hearn streaming this fight as a main event?
It's fucking terrible, man. It's terrible, bro. I mean, these motherfuckers, they're YouTube stars. I don't even know I know who Logan Paul. I don't even know who the other guy is, man. There's so much better opportunities to have better fights. I get the marketing point of view, from this fight, but I can't support that shit, man. Like that it's not gonna bring any new boxing fans in. It might be, it's just an exhibition, man. It's not going to bring any fans that are going to repeatedly watch the zone fights or repeatedly watch, Billy Joe Saunders or Devin Haney or any of it. People that are going to watch this can't even name any of Eddie Hearn's fighters or the promotional company that Eddie Hearn has. So I don't have any interest in this main event. I think it's stupid. You and me off the show talked about the marketing aspect of it, and I'm guessing you'll show those points in your retort, but I just don't think that it's good for boxing. I don't. It's an exhibition, man. It's like when Floyd fought Conor. You're not gonna get any new boxing fans because Floyd fought Conor, man. It's stupid. So that's my opinion on it.
I mean, I look at it like this: the first fight between these 2 fuckheads brought in over $150 million in revenue. That alone tells me put on this fight, especially with Dazn losing out on the big fights. Losing out. We don't know what the hell Canelo's doing. The Joshua Wilder's been flushed down the toilet for a while. The Ruiz Joshua should bring in some good revenue, but if you could put these 2 ass clowns on and get over $150 million and put on the undercard, Saunders, Haney, maybe 1-2 other guys to get them at least staying active and get them out and exposed to different audience. And like you said, I don't think a ton of fans are going to be huge boxing fans after this, but you got to tell me if X amount of people go and watch this, there's going to be a few people that are going to become boxing fans. I'm not saying it's going to be like 14 million new boxing fans, but you're going to get a few people that are going to watch the card, unfamiliar with boxing, and they'll be like, hey, this is kind of fun. I want to see what happens on next card or whatever the case may be. Because to be a boxing fan, you got to start somewhere. I started only because my dad was a boxing fan and he didn't follow any of the sports. So all my sports teams are scattered throughout the U.S., but I became a boxing fan through him. And what I noticed with like our generation age group, I mean, I'm a little bit older than you, but a lot of my friends from back home, they, once I left, they don't really follow boxing without me being there. We gather at the house and we eat and drink and watch the fights and things like that. But since I've been gone, only like 1 or 2 people still follows boxing. So boxing really needs something that crosses over and brings in, even if it's a minuscule amount of new fans, just to keep the future generations of fans going. All these guys that follow Jake Paul and this other guy, they got to be young because it's YouTube stars, YouTube generation. So I think if you're going to introduce boxing to somebody, that age range of 12 to 16, 17, which is probably most of the people that follow these guys, maybe even younger, now would be the time. And again, I don't think you can get millions of new fans, but I think at least you're going to get a few new fans. They're going to see the Paul fight against this KSI kid, and they're going to like that. And maybe they'll see Devin Haney and be like, oh, that guy Haney was good in the undercard. Or maybe with Billy Joe Saunders, even though his fights aren't exciting. But, when he fucks around, somebody misses a punch, he's looking in the crowd, or the way he clowns people in the ring and stuff like that. Maybe somebody will take to that and be like, oh, this guy showboats. That was kind of funny. I want to see his next fight. And again, boxing has to do something. And everyone's like, boxing's not dead. And it's not dead. But what happens when, our generation gets old, passes away? What other generations are going to – it just seems every generation follows boxing less and less. Whereas my son gets older and he has a son, it just seems to me boxing at that point – I mean, we'll be long gone, but boxing at that point are probably against the ropes because it's like, how do you build a new fan base? And I think we covered this a while back in one of the other shows, but it just seems like boxing has to do something to get a crossover appeal. And I'm not saying this would be 10 million new fans, but I think this can help bring in a certain amount of new fans.
Well, here's the thing. I think the way that you bring in new boxing fans, and this is what's missing from the sport now, and it's missing from the sport very badly, is the premise of the best fighting the best. I believe if you do that, it's gonna bring the fans to the sport. If you have Spence fight Terrence Crawford, that will bring fans to the sport. If you would have originally had Deontay Wilder fight Anthony Joshua, that would have brought fans to the sport. The only way I think you can have fans come to the sport, and UFC has done a magnificent job at doing this, is you have the best fight the best. That, to me, is not having 2 YouTubers fight. Then I feel like Eddie Hearns, Bob Arum, Tom Brown, whoever the fuck is promoting Al Heyman's fights, they failed as promoters, because Matchroom Boxing has fantastic prospects on it. I think they had Bivol, they had Demetrius Andres, they have fucking Anthony Joshua. They have all these guys, and you're telling me that the answer with all these great guys in your roster and all these events that you can make is having this shit.
The best fighting the best, to me, unless it's mega stars, they're not going to do anything. Better Beef's fighting the nail. That's the best fighting the best. You know how many fans are going to come to that aren't boxing fans? Absolutely nobody, because no one knows who the fuck they are. They have to get outside bigger than life stars. In the 80s, you had Tyson. Before that, you had Ali. Even Chris Nassim to an extent, Floyd Mayweather recently. People that can be recognized outside the sport is what boxing needs. And they just don't have that. Like I said a few shows back, with the WWE has the same issue where, you see them bringing The Undertaker back from the grave, or You see Hogan coming back and all, because the WWE doesn't push and promote their own stars, which kind of goes to the point of you saying the best fighting the best. But boxing has to find a way to get out more to, in my opinion, the more mass appeal of people, where I think, again, the best fighting the best doesn't matter because, again, better beef. No one knows who he or the nail is. You know, you can have the best fight the best, but no one's going to know who these guys still are unless they get a crossover appeal, or if you get some like Sports Center to follow boxing more closely. And, you know, if you have boxing on NBC or CBS, like growing up, it used to be on, I remember watching Whitaker and McGirt, I think it was on CBS in the afternoon. You know, an afternoon boxing like that on a Sunday that's off from the NFL schedule, something like that where, you know, more people have to be accessible to boxing and not just, I mean, Dazn and ESPN Plus are reasonably priced, but if you're not a boxing fan, you're not just going to subscribe for any single reason, just to watch boxing if you're not a fan. So you really have to do a better job of, you know, PBC as a Fox Sports, and every now and then the Fox, which is helpful, but they have to get boxing out to the mainstream, the public, in some ways. And I think this is a way to do it, because if this last fight made 150 million plus in American money, and the highest, it was $10 for a YouTube pay-per-view. So you got to do the math on that. How many people actually ordered this, and how many people actually streamed it? They said they lost another X amount of money, $12 million. They estimate. I think it's going to bring us some new fans. I'm not saying a lot, but I think that boxing has to go outside the realm of what they're doing now to draw people in. And unfortunately, a lot of these new guys that are really good or have been good, Lomachenko, Golovkin, Canelo, a lot of these guys are foreign and they can't speak English. And this just goes to the U.S., but also other countries as well. I mean, obviously, Canelo speaks Spanish. You live in the UK, you don't understand what the hell he's saying. But it has to find a way to get out and be more mainstream. But I think something like this could help. And I think something on, you know, the Sunday afternoon CBS fights, you know, something like that where, you know, again, the best fighting the best definitely will help. But take me, for example. I like boxing. I don't watch any UFC. The best fighting the best. I can't name anybody besides maybe 4 or 5 top stars. Not to knock the UFC and say it isn't good. And the structure is good because obviously it's more of a league than a sport. Well, mixed martial arts is a sport, UFC is a league. But boxing can never actually do that because obviously you have so many different promoters. But take me, for example, again, I can't name anybody in the UFC. The best to fight the best, and I don't really care. I mean, it's just not for me. And I think, again, with boxing, you know, Better Be versus Nail is a great fight. You know, where they have, what was coming up on the 14th? Comey and Lopez. That's a great fight for that division. You know, Terrence Crawford's fighting the, you know, undefeated guy is going to beat the Green Machine, but still. If you're not a boxing fan, who's going to follow those fights?
I have to say, we've done not a lot of podcasts, but we've done, what is this, 13, 14, something like that?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, and I have to say that was a fantastic rant that you went on right now. I have to say, listen, the numbers don't lie. And Logan Paul versus whoever the fuck this guy is, what's his name, KSL?
KSI, I think.
Well, whatever the fuck his name is. The numbers don't lie. Yes, it made a lot of money. Maybe it will bring a couple of fans to the sport. Probably not. But if you're optimistic, maybe it will. My problem is, and like I said, if this main event happens, it is what it is. For what it's worth, I'm not going to watch it. I'm sure a lot of people that are much younger than you and me will watch it. My whole question is, where the fuck has boxing went wrong? That you have to resort to this shit. Like, it's crazy the fact that there is so many worthy boxers. You mentioned 2 of them and probably what's going to be the fight of the year. There's so many worthy boxers out there. Casual fans can't grasp onto the fact that these guys are great and put their viewership towards people who deserve it. Now, I don't expect a 16 or a 17-year-old to do that. I don't, because they're the ones who support this kind of fight. But I also don't expect them to commit further to the sport after this fight. So, which was the same thing to me with Conor and Floyd. I keep using that fight as an example. I think that fight did something like 6 million pay-per-view buys or some outlandish number like that. And I'm pretty sure the people who watched that fight did not come back for more. They didn't say, oh, Gervonta Davis was on the undercard, or, this guy was on the undercard. I think Badu Jack was on the undercard and people like that. But we're not going to invest into, seeing how Gervonta Davis' career has progressed or anything like that. We just want to see this spectacle, which is Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather. And that's what I think this is. I mean, yeah, it's going to bring viewerships on that night. Maybe it'll have additional fans, but to me, it's just a fucking farce.
Oh, yeah, I'm definitely not saying it's fight of the century, but just from the money aspect alone, with Dazn losing on all the big fights, if this thing can bring you over $150 million, you put this damn thing on. Because Dazn needs to recoup some of the money, and I've been saying this for the longest, that, all the shows are putting out, all the money they're throwing out, they got to get it back with big fights. And sadly, if this is the big fight they get it back on, some of that money recouped, then so be it. Who am I to judge Fast Eddie Hearn, the used car salesman? But
I'm very interested to see what the final numbers are for this fight. And hopefully on a future podcast, we can discuss the impact that it had, whether negative or positive.
I agree. Logan Paul, middleweight champ, 2022. But on to something else, which last week we covered what makes somebody a Hall of Fame fighter. And this week, since Lomachenko fought, some guy on Twitter that really had the worst pound for pound I've read in years, I figured we'll talk about the pound for pound list on each of us. We were going to have a special guest on, but they tapped out, so we're going to have 3 pound for pound lists to compare. Right now, we'll just have 2, mine and yours. To your opinion, what, is your take on a pound for pound fighter as far as what do you use as criteria to put them on the list?
Well, it's a little strange with mine, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people listening to this podcast will disagree. I go with accomplishments, resume, and hypotheticals. And I know a lot of fans will disagree with the hypothetical part, but that's what I go with. I feel like take Terence Crawford, for example, which I think should be on everyone's top 5 pound for pound list. And he's on mine, and I hope he's on yours. But if you just go hypothetical alone, maybe I'm wrong. I don't. It's looking like PBC and Top Ranks will never fucking make these fights. But if he fights Pacquiao, Garcia, Spence, Porter, and Furman, I'm pretty sure that Terence Crawford goes 5-0 in those fights. And that's what I mean by hypotheticals. How would someone fare against another opponent? Resumes, of course, what they did, and accomplishments. If someone is an undisputed champion at their division, they should be in the top 5. And that's just my opinion. Someone like Usyk, who absolutely dominated the cruiserweight division, and I feel is going to be very avoided in the heavyweight division, should be in the top 5 pound for pound list just because of that accomplishment. So that's really my criteria that I go by.
Mine is probably the same as yours. I wouldn't say I use hypothetical, but I use the eye test, which is, I guess, similar to a hypothetical, but just when you could see that somebody's really good, like, for example, Lomachenko, a few fights in, we knew was a pound for pound fighter, but he had to get the resume to back him up. And once he got the resume to back him up, it was easy for me to put him into the top 10 pound for pound on my list. And as we go on, actually, let's open up our pound for pound list. I don't know about your number 1. I think you probably have Crawford. I have Lomachenko at number 1.
I have Terence Crawford.
I can't argue with Crawford. The only issue I would have is that his overall resume is good, but there's no marquee wins. But then as you were saying before, the hypotheticals get Crawford up to the number 1 ranking. If you look back in retrospect on his career, Posto was the best win, in my opinion. Delerme at the time didn't look bad, but then after we see what Delerme really was, Gamboa didn't look bad at the time, but it wasn't bad, I guess. He was going up with the middleweight, but I'll still accept that. John Molina, we knew what he was. Felix Diaz, I think, lost his next fight after Crawford.
Like I said, part of my process is hypotheticals, and maybe this sounds like you said, the eye test. Who knows the business end of this? Who knows whose fault it is between Top Ranks and PBC? And who knows if these fights are ever going to be made? I hope they are before, these people. I mean, Pacquiao's already out of his prime, so I don't put him in that category. But Porter, Spence, Keith Furman, if he gets back to the Keith Furman which is debatable if he will or won't. And there was another dude that was on that list that I'm not remembering right now. But if he fights Danny Garcia. If he fights these guys, then, and I truly believe that he has the skill set to beat them all. It's just the business end of them, it just seems impossible right now to make, which is sad because if he beats these 5 guys, which I think he would, there's no debate that he's the pound-for-pound king. His resume right now is average, but I think he's a tremendous fighter. I think he has the ability to beat you with the right or the left hand. He has toughness to him. You've seen that in some of the fights where he's been wobbled. That he has toughness along with skill. I just think he's a tremendous fighter, and I'm not disappointed or disapprove if someone has him at number 2 and has Lomachenko at number 1 because, it's a toss-up in my opinion, but Terrence Crawford right now is my number 1.
Oh, I can't knock him being number 1. I just don't think he has the resume to back it up where Lomachenko does have the resume. My number 2 happens to be Crawford. As you said, eye test-wise, I could see he's good, but also at the same time, back in my mind, I don't know if he looks really good because who he's fighting instead of fighting an upper-tier guy, which isn't really necessarily his fault. When he was at 140, it was a lot weaker than what it was today. But we're just going to have to wait and see with Crawford. If he keeps on winning, there's no way you can take him out of a top 3, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you have your number 2?
Lomachenko.
Okay.
Lomachenko is my number 2, as I think I truly think if you're a non-biased boxing fan, which I know you and me both are, you have to have either Lomachenko at number 1 or Crawford at number 1, Lomachenko number 2, or Crawford at number 2. I don't think there's any other fighters that can have those claims of being the best. Lomachenko is my number 2. A fantastic fighter, obviously. Probably, I mean, he can easily. He's pretty much 1A or 1B, whatever you call it. It's very hard to. I don't know. He's a fantastic fighter, man, and he's probably going to be the undisputed champion soon at 135, and he has dominated 3 divisions, and he's just a truly great champion, and he just seems like one of these guys that demands the best fights. A guy that takes on a rugged veteran like Orlando Salido in their second fight, and still takes him on when he fucking, what was he, a welterweight when and the fucking night of the fight or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think he weighed 138 at the actual weigh-in or some ridiculous shit like that. So props to him, man. And to take on Gary Russell in your 3rd fight. Lomachenko is truly a special talent, and he could probably retire today and become a Hall of Famer. Maybe I'm being a little bit exaggerated with him, but I in my opinion, he is. He's a Hall of Famer right now. So that's my number 2.
All right, number 3, I have Inoue, the monster over in Japan. I think he's a great fighter. he's still missing that marquee name. I mean, he's looked impressive with what he's done so far. Donaire's a little past. That's what's coming up for him. Payano was a little over the hill when he beat, what was his name? The first fight the Navarez, that was another fight where it was a good guy, but he was a little bit, I think, on the downside of the career. So he's had some solid wins. Eye test-wise, you can see he has ridiculous power for that weight division. But I have him at number 3.
I got Usyk at number 3. Undisputed champion. Going to be a fucking problem at heavyweight. I think he's fighting soon, I believe, in Chicago. I don't exactly know a date, but he's facing I forget the guy's name. He's 14-0 with 13 knockouts. Very, very good ex-kickboxer.
Yeah, Spring, whatever the hell his name is.
Yeah. So
I think it's October 12th.
October 12th. Okay, definitely. So even though that's a warm-up fight, and I fully expect Usyk to win, for all the fans that are listening, hopefully you all have seen Usyk, but if you haven't, check him out because he's a special talent. I truly believe he's going to dominate the heavyweight division. I don't think Anthony Joshua can beat him. I don't think Deontay Wilder can beat him. Maybe Tyson Fury has a chance just because he's a pure boxer, but Usyk has the opportunity to be and this is where my hypotheticals come in again, unfortunately, but I believe he has the opportunity to be an undisputed heavyweight champion if they don't avoid him, which they very well could. You see what kind of fucking mess that was before Ruiz beat Joshua. So if they don't avoid him, he could easily be not easily, but he could be the undisputed heavyweight champion. He's fantastic talent, fun fighter to watch. And that's my number 3 right there.
I can't argue with him. I had him a little bit higher originally, but I don't know. Well, we'll get to that when it gets to it. But number 4, I got Alvarez. I'm not a fan of his, but when you look at his resume and the weight divisions, he's won belts, even though the 168 really was a true title. But still, as much as I don't like him, it's tough not to have him in the top 5.
Fair enough. Okay, this is where your criticism is probably going to come in, Thomas. So I expect it. My number 4 is Errol Spence. He's my number 4 because first of all, I think the welterweight division is the best division in boxing. Maybe 140 can compete with it, but I think right now it's the best division in boxing. I don't think anyone, including Sean Porter, was probably going to lose to Spence. I don't think anyone could beat Spence at 47 except for Crawford. I don't think anyone could beat him at 54 if he goes up there, and probably no one could beat him at 60. He's a fantastic fighter. Even though Mikey Garcia was a smaller man, no one really expected Spence to outbox Mikey Garcia. There was a lot of predictions that he was going to overpower him and knock him out. But no one really expected that kind of boxing performance against Mikey Garcia. I also believe, if I'm not mistaken, I don't have a box rec in front of me, so I'm just speaking off of memory, so maybe I'm wrong here. But I believe he also went to Kell Brooks' home and beat him in a very convincing performance. Just a great fighter to me. I feel like he has the potential to be higher in the list one day, or a pound for pound king. Hopefully him and Terrence Crawford fight, man. That would be one hell of a fight, man. And it's a shame that Arum and Al Heyman are keeping this away from the fans, because this is probably also an addition what makes fans lose interest in boxing, is that you got 2 potential top 5 pound for pound. I mean, Errol Spence is debatable in a lot of people's eyes, but in my opinion, 2 top 5 pound for pound fighters, and they're not facing each other because of promotional disputes, and I think that's bullshit. I think this is a reason why fans leave the sport. I know this is not really related to the pound for pound thing, but I just it's a strong thing, because I think it destroys the fabric of the sport when you don't have these two great fighters fighting each other. But that's my number 4 is Errol Spence.
I can't argue Spence being on the list. I think 4 is a little bit high unless you're going off my eye test, your hypotheticals. Not that he doesn't have the talent to be, even 2 or 3 at this point or 4. I just don't think he has enough. I mean, his big 2 wins are Garcia coming up in weight. Everyone says 2 weight classes. It's not. He had a belt at 140 but being Lipnitz, so he only went up 1 weight class. And the other one beating Brook, but, you could argue that Brook was having a tough time making 147 and just got that beating by the hands of Golovkin and the eye issue. And not to say that takes anything away from Spence's victory. A lot of people thought Brook could win that fight, stop Spence. I like Spence since the Olympics. He's born in New York. A lot of people forget that. He's actually 1 town away from me. He grew up majority of his life, almost all his life in Texas, but he was actually born in Long Island, New York, which people tend to forget, especially with that accent and his pronunciation of fighters, which is worse than ours. But I'd love him as a fighter, though. I think he's a great fighter. I think if he beats Porter, I would have a lot more justification putting him higher on my list. But I'd have to see him beat Porter because that would be the first major win where no one could say anything negative about. Some people use the weight with Garcia, which I don't fully buy into because, like you said, Spence outboxed him. It's not like he went in there and ball rogged him and ran him over. He outboxed him. And with the Brook, people can say he had problems making 147 and the eye issue, which I kind of still find false anyway. But the Porter would be the first fight where, you'll still have some idiots just with something to say, but the Porter fight would be the realistic first fight where if somebody had any criticism of it, besides if Spence got like a robbery decision, which I don't anticipate he should win outright clearly, there shouldn't be any issue from fans on that one, in my opinion. But number 5, I had your number 3 in Usyk. I had him at number, I think, 4 last time I did my pound for pound. And I think I just dropped him down a little bit with inactivity. So it wasn't even anything that he did. He had the injury and he's coming back against Tyrone Sprong. And it's not a great opponent, but that wasn't his first, second, third choice. So basically, since the Bellow fight, which I think was November, he's going to be all a year time. His only fight's going to be Tyrone Sprong, whatever those name is. And again, nothing against him. Great fighter, unified cruiserweight, had some really, really big wins. And more impressive than the wins was going to people's backyards. He beat Gassiev in Russia. He beat Bellow in England. He beat Breedis in Riga. He beat Huck, in Germany. He beat Michael Hunter in the U.S. And Glowacki, he beat in Poland. I mean, those are some major wins in the division and going into the other guy's backyard, no less. And that's another thing I don't think people really talk about is that, he's going on the road for some of these huge wins.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely fantastic talent. My number 5 is the Monster. Not the best of resume, but I guess you could say the same about Spence and Crawford, but just not the best resume. The best fight out there, I guess, is Neary, which I don't think will ever happen because Neary's people, I don't think will put him near the Monster because they know how that will end. Facing Donaire next. Donaire's, I don't think that fight's going to last 5 rounds. I mean, he's an excellent talent. He's just in a division that doesn't have a lot of, great opposition, which is not his fault. You can only beat who's put in front of you. But definitely the talent is definitely there. I left Canelo off my top 5 list. All his supposed signature wins are disputed, and I don't see. I mean, I didn't think he dominated Jacobs. I thought he lost the first Golovkin fight. I thought the second Golovkin fight could have went to Canelo or it could have been a draw. I'm not mad either way. I think it could have went to Canelo. He went life and death with Austin Trout. He lost to Laura. I don't care what anyone says. And he got absolutely dominated by Mayweather. So I don't see him, when he steps up, he doesn't have a victory that I can say, oh, he dominated the best. So Canelo would be, my number 6. He would be right out of top 5, in my opinion.
I can't argue with your thinking in that. And like you said, his big major fights, there's not one fight where you're like, oh, Canelo blew the sky out the water. And, that I can fully agree with that. My number 6 is I got G3. Even at his age, he showed signs of slippage, I thought, against Rolls. But at the same time, I mean, look at what he's done recently. He's going to fight Derevchenko. If he winds up winning that could justify him to some people that think he's lower in the top 10 or out of the top 10. Before that, the Alvarez fights, everyone has him in the top 10. Most people in the top 5. I thought he won the first one easily. The second one, I thought could be 115, 113 either which way or a draw. I personally thought G3 edged it out, but I couldn't really have an argument with Canelo winning either. The Brook fight, Brook went up 2 weight divisions, but he still beat Brook's eye out of his head. And Brook right now fights at 154, so technically Brook probably only went up 1 weight division as far as his natural weight. Jacobs was a close one. I thought Golovkin won it with the knockdown, but I thought he still won it cleanly. And he has a lot of wins against middle range opponents. Willie Monroe, David Lemieux, Martin Murray. Those guys aren't terrible fighters. They may not be great fighters, pound for pound material, but all those guys at that point of him fighting him, I thought were in the top 10 of that division. So those are still good wins. He just really made it look pretty easy. So that's why I have G3 as my number 6. And until he loses clearly, it's hard not to have him in the top 10.
I agree. That's why I have him at number 7. I have Triple J at number 7. I thought that his dominating win against the great Spartan gladiator Steve Rolls definitely, it definitely enhanced my opinion on him. I'm just joking, obviously, but hey, he's definitely in the top 10. Even at this advanced age, you can't justify taking him off the top 10. I have him at number 7. I didn't really come up with a top 10 list, so whatever the rest of my list is going to be off the top of my head. I don't know if you came up with a top 10, so.
I keep all my lists handy.
Keep going, fuck it, but it's going to be off the top of my head.
Well, 7th I had Spence, and as I stated, I think talent-wise, Spence could be a 2 or 4 guy right now, but it was hard to put him in there without a really big signature win where no one could actually find anything to gripe about. But with the upcoming bout with Porter, that would be that fight, in my opinion. So if Spence was to beat Porter cleanly, I would definitely move him up a couple of spots. Number 8, I have Mikey Garcia. A lot of people kind of blew him off after the Spence fight, but at the same time, last few years, Garcia was a 2 weight division champion. He had really easy, solid wins against Robert Easter Jr., Lipnitz, Broner and his trash can self, and that other guy, I can't pronounce his name, which hindsight wasn't a great win, that Zakhlakinin guy where he won the WBC belt in. But still, those are Easter, Lipnitz, Broner, and going the distance, even though you lost their round, but going the distance with a bigger Spence. And when you look at his whole resume as far as career, to me, he still belongs somewhere on the bottom of that top 10 pound for pound. I could maybe switch 9 and 8 around, which is very feasible. But right now I have Garcia at 8. He's going to be fighting, I believe, at 140, which is a little bit better of a weight division for him. And there's a lot of good guys at 140 where definitely, he can fight and really prove that he belongs on my list.
Okay. Let's see, number 8. I have Regis.
Regis, all right.
Regis is my number 8. The kid is tremendous. I think he's going to beat Josh Taylor, which is Josh Taylor is no pushover. He's pretty much he's shown that he's probably the strongest puncher in that division. I mean, the guy can knock anybody out. He doesn't get enough credit. I think he's part of the Bella, if I'm not mistaken. And just in my opinion, the Bella has done a pretty terrible job not making him a household name, because he should be at this point. He definitely top 10 pound for pound talent. He's gonna win that tournament. He's right now the best 140 pound in the world, and I hope I think that Broner called him out, and I hope that Broner gets that ass whooping. And I know you do too, because I know you love Broner so much. I hope Broner gets that ass whooping. So that's my number 8 right there.
I would put the Progress Taylor winner in my top 10, and that's what, because my last 2 are pretty much wide open. But I would put the winner of that fight, I think, would really have a win that solidifies him. Because right now, I could see it, like you said, the eye test hypotheticals, I could see it in Progress, but I need to see that win first. I mean, Terry Flanagan's an all right win. Julius Sandago, I mean, you saw what Crawford did to him. The Joel Diaz is a nice win at the time, but when you hindsight some of these, they're like, eh. But the win of him and Josh Taylor, I would definitely stick in my top 10, because that's the number 1 guy at 140. And nothing against Ramirez, but the winner of the Taylor Progress fight is definitely the number 1 guy at 140 for me.
Absolutely agree with you. And all I have to say is that, as I said before, you can only beat who's put in front of you. And he has absolutely demolished everyone that has been put in front of him. Everyone. And whoever wins that fight is definitely the best at 140. Definitely, without a doubt, deserves a mention in the top 10 pound for pound, even though I already had one of them in the top 10 pound for pound. But definitely, that is a must-watch fight. You know, for all the casual boxing fans out there, please watch that fight. If you're a casual boxing fan, you're probably not listening to this podcast. But if you are, please watch that fight, because that will probably turn you into a boxing fan. Are we up to number 9?
Number 9, I have Juan Francisco Estrada. I think if you look, he has the loss against Wangnick. I thought he actually won. He beat him convincingly in the rematch, and that's what dropped Wangnick, if I'm pronouncing that right, outside of my top 10. The Quadras was a nice win. Hernan Marquez was a nice win. His real clean loss recently to me was 2012 against Roman Gonzalez, and that's when Gonzalez was a pound-for-pound name, and that was a close fight. I thought it was about 8-4 Roman Gonzalez won, but it definitely showed that Estrada, even back then, was a definite pound-for-pound material guy in the making.
Since I don't have a 9th pick, I will go with your pick, because, to be quite honest with you, that's an excellent pick. A very, very good underrated fighter. After the Gonzalez fight, that really was the second half of his career where he absolutely looked fantastic. You know, I'm actually glad that you have him in the top 10 list. I'm glad that you give a fighter that deserves it that kind of credit. So definitely, that's a very good pick at number 9, and I'll go with him as well at number 9.
That sounds good. And number 10, you know, I'm wide open to, Estrada and Garcia I could interchange. I could put Estrada easily at 8. I don't think I put him any higher at 8. And if Garcia doesn't get active soon, I mean, I could see myself logically dropping out of the top 10. And the other guy in my top 10 is just there off the eye test, and that's Luis Nery. And again, he has to step up and fight a better name opposition. But, despite what you said about the wins against Yamanaka, whatever the hell his name is, the Japanese guy, I always pronounce his names terribly. If you want to say the weight issue or him failing a drug test, but they still count for wins in the ledger no matter what happened during those fights. So you got to count him. The piano fight and his last fight took him a little while to get warmed up, but took him out of there. The McJoe Arroyo fight, who was a pretty decent boxer, blew the doors off him. And you could really put a lot of guys in that 10th spot for me. And again, I'd put the Progress Taylor winner in. I could see when Fury and Wilder fight, I'd put either of those guys in my top 10. But I have to see somebody get that big win to get elevated into the top 10. So for right now, I have Neri. I think just by the eye test, he looks good as far as power. Him and Inoue would be a great fight if it happens. I don't think it will, but, that would be a exciting fight with two pound-for-pound power punchers. But, again, with that 10th spot, you can interchange a few guys out if you kind of saw fit. But I think my top 10 is pretty solid. I was talking to a guy online on Twitter. His top 10, he didn't have Golovkin, which is like, all right, I partially understand if, you're being serious. He didn't have Neri, which I can't argue with. He didn't have Garcia, which was kind of a little bit odd if you look at his recent resume and everything he's done. He didn't have Spence, which was like, again, I don't understand that one. But the people he had were just comical. Like, he had Tanaka, which I think was the closest guy he listed, which is he owns a belt in whatever the third division is from the bottom. I can't remember the division. I don't really follow those really low divisions too much. He had Kenshiro, which if you look at who he has as far as wins, they're comical. Like the best two wins he listed, I think one guy was 24-4, and like 20 out of his 24 wins, the guys had less than 10 wins. And the other guy listed, the other guy listed, I think was 30-something-9. But in his 20th fight as a pro, he lost a pro debut guy who wound up being 12-7. Like, those are your best two wins. And it's nothing against the lower weight divisions, because I don't particularly follow them too much besides the major guys. And it's a lot like women's boxing in the fact that you could have these guys like that aren't Lomachenko that have single-digit fights winning a championship, because there's just not a lot of talent in those divisions. Despite, if you're a big fan of Asian boxing, you've seen countless times where, I mean, granted, Inoue's looking great, but you've seen countless other Japanese fighters come out of Japan, fight in the U.S., or fight major guys, and, wind up getting exposed. And there's just not a lot of talent, despite what anybody tries to tell me, in those lower divisions. And it's to me, it's like women's boxing. Like Clarissa Shields is probably going to be a 3-division champion at, 10 fights. That's great, but who are you fighting? There's just no one there to fight. And when there's no one there to fight, the brightest stars are going to shine brighter, because you could be a B fighter down there and look like an A+++ fighter, because you're fighting D and C level fighters. So, of course, you're going to look outlandishly good, because who are you facing?
I mean, I agree with you. By the way, my number 10 is Tyson Fury. But to get to your point, the lower levels, like you said, there's not a lot of competition, man. Like, who the fuck are you going to – what's the lowest weight class? I think it's called minimum weight at 100 pounds or something like that.
I think 106 is the minimum weight. It's like 100, 100 something like that.
Who are you gonna face? Who? Like, you can't even get like you're sparring kids. You can't get any. There's no competition at 106. There's hardly any competition at 115 or 112. So how can you determine, if someone is worth, that kind of pound for pound, reputation? I don't know. It's just that those lower weight classes, just they get no love, and deservingly so, to be honest with you. I mean, they don't have the type of talent. They don't get any TV money because of that. Even though some of the fights are pretty exciting, if you do see some of those fights from the lower weight classes, because they're just so fucking fast. But you can't really judge a great fighter from those divisions, because like you said, similar to women's boxing, who's Clarissa Shields facing? She's a fantastic female fighter, but she is light years ahead of most of the people that she's beating. So it's just one of those things where it's almost impossible to put them in a top 10 or even a top 20 pound for pound. And unless you have some kind of influx of 106-pound fighters, it's going to be like that pretty much forever. By the way, where do you have someone like Pacquiao?
I have my top 15. And a lot of that is based off overall career, because a lot of people only look at a certain range. But I also factor in if you've been very steady for your whole career. And that's Pacquiao has been that for me. I have my own opinions about the Thurman fight. I don't see how he got faster, getting older, when you compare him to the Matisse or the Broner fights or even Jesse Vargas. Now all of a sudden you're really strong and faster than previously in those fights. But without actual proof, I'd still have him in my top 15. I'd really have to break it down and put him in. And the Tanaka, the one guy that's 3 divisions from the bottom, I've seen him fight a couple times. He's not bad. I have him in my lower top 20, I would say. I haven't actually written one out, but he has some quality wins, and I put him in there. But, this guy's trying to tell me Ken Shiro, and there's not a chance. Ken Shiro, I mean, come on. My son has a chance of knocking out Ken Shiro.
I'm like, he's 15-0, but he has like a fucking majority decision against a guy who gets absolutely obliterated by prospects. So I don't know, man. You're taking these trolls too seriously, man. Like, I don't think that can't actually be an actual list where you have Ken fucking Shiro, fucking Japanese hero, at top 10 pound for pound. That's an exaggerated tale.
See, the thing that killed me with this guy, number one, is his monkey on Twitter is something betting guru, but I looked at past bets and there's nothing guru-ish about it. But what made it funny was that he said all he does is base everything on resume. Nothing's eye test. There's no bias. So how do you have Ken Shiro on there? What's he done resume-wise? He had Donnie Niedes on there, who's not a bad fighter. He's very steady, and granted, he's a 3-division champ in the last 3 or 4 years, but who has he really faced? If you look at it, I mean, he'd probably be my lower top 22 just for his steadiness of winning belts and things. But, who's that man faced? Even with Inoue, if you look at him, it's an eye test you're doing. He has no big win. It's an eye test. And he has some solid wins, but it's an eye test. So how does it work for him, but not for Spence? He might be an Asian fan because, he had Inoue, he had like Tanaka, he had Shiro, he had the guy that Estrada beat, Wangyak or whatever his name was. He had Donnie Niedes, and that's like 5 guys in the first like 3 or 4 weight divisions, all that are Asian. Like, come on, bro, just to stop it. And I understand there's a matter of opinion, but he's one of those people that were like, I'm right, you're wrong. You could tell me why you'd have fear in your top 10. And I could agree with it. Like, I may not have in mind, but I can understand. But if you don't have like Golovkin and saying, what wins has he gotten that have been impressive? And the Jacobs win was close. But then you take Shiro, who just edged past a guy that was nothing. But it counts that he was close against Jacobs, but Shiro and getting close. I don't know. People are online idiots. That's the basic it comes down to.
You've been caught in the web of online trolling. I hate to tell it to you, Thomas.
No, there's some people that just think they know so much about boxing, and I'm not saying we're geniuses or masterminds, but at least we have some logic as far as watching it for years, and I think we're both pretty unbiased. And also I think we worked in the sport, which kind of helps some other aspects as well. But you see some of these guys on Twitter with like 60 posts a day about absolutely nothing. And it's like, just tell me something interesting already, or, anything. It's just, I don't know. Twitter's good to talk to a few really good boxing minds and to hopefully spread our show a little bit more. But it's bad because there's just so many people out there that are just trolls. And it's like, there has to be something better to do in your life.
I agree, bro. I agree with that.
On that note, fuck boxing Twitter. But next week, hopefully we will finally have our guest or one of our guest options. Until then, there's absolutely nothing. Well, there's some things you could stream this weekend from the sport, but there's not going to be anything TV-wise, nothing major fight-wise. So if there was ever a weekend you were thinking about doing something, cutting the grass, having a yard sale, having a few drinks with friends at the beach or something, this is the weekend to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But until then, folks, we'll catch you next week. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you next week on the show, and we'll have some more interesting topics to debate.
All right, peace.